Okay, today we're breaking down an entire line of paddles from a company called Neonic. This is the Flare, this is the Flow, and this is the OG Neonic Force. And if you stick around until the end of the video, you'll get a sneak peek at a few more paddles Neonic's working on. You won't want to miss that. But first things first, Neonic is a company that's been around for a little while now. However, their paddles haven't been on my radar too much. And wow, I've been missing out. And be warned, I'm about to go on a little bit of a tangent right now, so if you want to skip ahead to the paddle reviews, definitely feel free to. However, make sure you don't miss the end of the video because Neonic's letting me give one of their paddles away for free, so you'll definitely want to see how to enter. If you want to get a head start, you can go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. But before we talk specs, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what kind of paddle company Neonic is. And to do that, I think it'd be helpful for me to break down how I look at paddle companies overall. For me, I classify companies in 3 distinct categories. So let's go through them. First, you have the companies putting out a lot of the cheap stuff on Amazon, or the paddles you see popping up in Alibaba and in Temu ads all the time, and even some of the generic stuff on the shelves at big box retail. I'm sure there are some really good paddles in that mix, but it's kind of hard to know what you're actually getting, as there's just not much info out there on these companies or their paddles, or really much transparency at all. And before I was a reviewer, those kinds of paddles didn't interest me too much, as I would only get a new paddle probably every 4 to 6 months. So I was way too precious to take a flyer or a gamble on something I couldn't find any info on. And then as a reviewer now, there are just so many good companies and paddles out these days, I really don't want to dip my toe into such an overwhelming and unknown space. Also, I prefer USAP approved paddles for a number of reasons, and many of those cheap paddle companies don't go through that process. Okay, after that though, you have a second category of paddle companies, in my opinion. All the big brands, some of which are legacy brands that were around before pickleball really blew up the last few years, and these are the paddle companies that pretty much dominate the space. And they really try to maintain that dominance in some good and in some bad ways. These companies are your Yolas, Selkirk, Engage, I'd say Carbon now, and arguably Gearbox and Paddle Tech. Typically companies that have high quality gear but at higher price points. A lot of that, I'm guessing, is because those companies seemingly finance the whole pro pickleball scene and player contracts and all of that, in addition to being gear companies. And from what I can tell, that professional stuff isn't cheap. Also, while it's changing a bit nowadays, those companies tended to be a little slower on the innovation front, at least at the rec level. However, the ones I just mentioned are the legacy brands and the juggernauts that do have a pretty solid reputation and history of innovating for the most part. But there are a lot of other older companies that I didn't mention that don't, in my opinion. Finally, the third and last category of paddle companies are the smaller brands trying to break into the scene. And a lot of these only came about when pickleball exploded the last few years, bringing new players and interest to the game. And I divide this group into 2 subcategories as well. The first are companies that produce cookie cutter paddles and are just picking things from a factory catalog and slapping a logo onto it. And the second style of emerging companies are the ones trying to do something different and specific, instead of being generic and competing solely on price point. This is my favorite kind of company. And they can even start off as the more cookie cutter kind I just talked about to help raise capital and gain industry knowledge, and then eventually evolve into the innovative kind. That has definitely happened. However, as long as the generic is competitive on price, I'm actually fine with either models, if I'm being honest. But my favorite is definitely the more innovative one. They find the resources to really experiment and make paddles that are unique and different, and to me are oftentimes more player oriented, and they do all this while keeping their paddles and gear affordable. This really is a special kind of company, and it's a much shorter list than all the others. A few examples that come to mind are Honolulu Pickleball, 11624, Kiwi Labs, Spartus. Vatic is probably the OG of this model, and then I would say Neonic falls squarely in this category as well. And there are definitely more than this, but these are the ones I have the most history with and have some specific knowledge on how they do things. So Neonic is one of these special companies. Well, what does that actually mean? It means Neonic is creating some freaking awesome paddles that are super competitively priced. They're one of those rare emerging companies that has a super unique line of paddles and is trying to carve out and hold space for themselves in what's becoming a more and more crowded marketplace. And I really do think they're knocking it out of the park with their current lineup, so let's talk about it. Neonic has 3 main flavors in their lineup: the Flare, the Flow, and the Force. And more than anything, these names help differentiate the different shapes of their paddles, as well as some general play characteristics. However, that might be changing a bit as they continue to expand and grow their lines. All that will probably make sense a little later. But now, I want to do a deep dive into the brand new Neonic Flare Titanium, as I think this is a super unique paddle and one of the absolute best, if not the very best, titanium paddle available right now. And it is just so much fun to hit with. Here are the specs. The Flare Titanium is a 60mm paddle. Its face is a blend of what's being commonly labeled titanium in the pickleball paddle space, as well as T700 carbon fiber and a layer of fiberglass. The shape is a wide body. It's thermoformed unibody with perimeter edge foam. It's a Gen 2 paddle, and it has a polypropylene core with 8mm cells. Dimensions are 16 by 8 inches. The grip length is 5.5 inches. The grip circumference is 4.125 inches. The average weight is 8.1 to 8.3 ounces. The advertised swing weight is 112 to 114. The advertised twist weight is 7 to 7.2. And the paddle does include a really nice neoprene paddle cover, and there is a 6-month manufacturing defects warranty. As for price, it's $135 after you use promo code MatthewK for a 10% discount. And this paddle is USAP approved. Okay, this is another quote unquote titanium paddle, which means it uses polyester threads that derive their shiny metallic look via a process that potentially involves or once involved the use of titanium. That's the origin of the name, and based off all the info I've gathered, it seems that's how factories presented the material to paddle company owners when it was first introduced to the pickleball space. I dive into a lot more detail and the surrounding controversy in my review of the bread and butter Shogun for anyone curious. But the gist is that this material usually gives the paddle face utilizing it a much more plush feel and gentler feedback compared to carbon fiber, Kevlar, and fiberglass faces. So titanium really softens the paddle in my opinion and makes controlling and placing the ball really easy with that extra dwell time. The only exception to this rule that I've tested is the Mosey Gold Rush. That one is a very stiff feeling paddle in my opinion, and its titanium face does little to soften the ball feel, once again in my opinion. I've also heard similar things about a stiffer feel with the titanium paddles from a company called Next Gen, but I haven't had a chance to hit with those just yet. With all that said, I can happily report Neonic's take on titanium falls nicely into the plush, gentle category of touch and feel. And this is becoming my favorite titanium paddle when it comes to the control side of the game. This wide body shape gives you a massive amount of real estate to catch the ball and throw it back wherever you want. Very much like the Volair Mach 2 Forza. And the softer face really holds onto the ball, giving you that increase in dwell time so you can really target and place your shots super easily. So if you like the short game, dinking, blocking, resetting, slowing things down, this is a great choice. However, there's something super unique that Neonic is beginning to do with their paddles that helps solidify their place in that innovative category of paddle companies I was talking about earlier. And it has to do with how they're experimenting with their paddle surface materials, even beyond the use of titanium. They're starting to use different materials and mixing them and layering them in different ways to create paddles that have super unique play attributes. And this kind of experimenting with surfaces really hasn't been that common with Gen 2 paddles, most of which have stuck with multiple layers of carbon fiber. But the Kevlar craze and now titanium has really gotten companies to push the envelope and try different things with their paddle surfaces. Neonic and other companies like 11624 and Chorus have really been on the vanguard on that front, and Honolulu also has a sleeper one with the J1H as well. And specifically for the Flare Titanium, Neonic used 3 distinct materials for their face. The top layer is gold titanium woven with carbon fiber. Then there's a middle layer of T700 and a bottom layer of fiberglass. So the ball touches a soft top layer and then has a blend beneath it that's stiff that gives you some pop. However, the paddle doesn't feel like it has a low dwell time, probably because of that top layer of titanium more than anything. So you really have the best of both worlds. A paddle that plays aggressively with feedback and dwell time that helps you maintain control. And this varies from one of my favorite paddles of the year, the J2K Titanium, and how that paddle feels. To my knowledge, there's no fiberglass or poppy backboard with Honolulu's titanium paddle. That being said, I still wouldn't say the J2 Ti plays softer or has a plusher feel than the Flare Titanium. I can't say why exactly. It might have to do with the Flare's wide body shape being able to absorb more energy than the J2's hybrid shape. It could have something to do with how their cores vary. I'm really not sure. But I would personally say the Flare leans more into control than the J2 Ti. because of that softer touch and feel more than anything else. However, the Flare's pop with that fiberglass backboard is very good. It's just also very controllable. As for the Flare Titanium's power, I don't think you'll be feeling this thing is underpowered at all, especially for the shape. I thought it was great with drives and baseline hits. With that 112 to 114 swing weight, it's right up there with the J2 Ti, which is an all-court leaning towards control in my opinion. So this thing has a ton of power for a wide body. So who's this paddle for? Well, if you're a player that likes to get up to the kitchen, slow things down, and have buttery dinks, the Neonic Flare Titanium is an amazing choice. And once again, that swing weight and how the paddle is built gives you plenty of power for drives, baseline hits, and putaways. But what really stands out with this thing is the control game. As for value, $135 after promo code MatthewK saves you 10% is pretty unbeatable. That's $2 less than a Spartus Apollo, $5 less than a J2 Ti, and $27 less than a Volar Mach 2 Forza. So this paddle really is a great deal, and Neonic's budget pricing married with its drive to innovate is why it's in that special category of top tier paddle companies. And that willingness to experiment and push innovation is why we have an alternate version of this paddle, which Neonic now calls the Flare Prime Control. This paddle was produced at the same time as the titanium version, but it's built a bit differently. Instead of including titanium in its face, it has 2 layers of carbon fiber with 1 layer of fiberglass sandwiched in the middle, not the bottom like the titanium version. And then the control is also a 14mm paddle that utilizes 6mm cells in its honeycomb, rather than the more common 8mm that's used in most paddles, including what's being used in the Flare Titanium. However, Neonic has sadly decided to discontinue this version of the Flare. For this paddle, they'd envisioned something that was a bit stiffer, with more pop and power than how the control turned out. So they're making some changes and creating a new paddle called the Neonic Flare Prime X, which is supposed to realize that vision, a very poppy and powerful paddle in the Flare shape. However, this one here, the Flare Prime Control, is freaking awesome. I tested this one out quite a bit, and it plays more aggressively than the titanium version, but still with great control. This paddle build really complements my particular style. For me, I'm a control leaning player, but this version of the Flare helped me be super aggressive without negatively impacting my short dinking game. Speed ups and hard drives felt very natural to me, and I never felt like I was fighting against this paddle in the softer side of the game, and that's something that's super important to me. I love to have power when I bring it with a swing, but I don't like to have a lot of pop off the face when I'm not moving the paddle very much. And this paddle balances all of that super well and is really great for someone that likes to play soft and have a super loose grip. Neonic has labeled the feel of the control as soft with high pop, compared to the upcoming Flare Prime X, which they're saying is stiff with high pop. This is a contrast to how they describe the Flare Titanium as being plush with a spring effect. I suppose Neonic's thinking is that players that want control won't want that pop and would just go for the titanium. Or if they want to play hard and fast, they want a stiff paddle that has pop all the time, like what the upcoming Prime X is described as. However, I think a paddle that lets you be aggressive when you want to and soft when you want to is freaking awesome. And it's the exact kind of paddle that suits my play style. I love that I don't have to switch gears mentally between the baseline game and dinking game with the control. This paddle did it for me. And more than anything, I think it has a lot to do with those compact 6mm cells used in its core. It's kind of like having a secret weapon. It's there when you need it, and it stays tucked away when you don't. In fact, I've noticed this with other paddles that use 6mm cells, and there really aren't a lot of them. The now discontinued Ballista V2 from Spartus had 6mm cells, as does some of Phantom's paddles, and the upcoming Juice from Kiwi Labs does as well. If you know of others though, definitely let me know in the comments. And just a heads up, companies labeling cells as compact or narrow cell doesn't always mean they're 6mm. And while I'm super excited about the updated Prime X that's on the way, which will be using those 6mm cells, I'm afraid it might be too poppy for me, but we'll see. However, I do know Neonic is open to bringing back a batch of the control version if there's enough interest and demand. So if this is something you'd like to see, I'd highly recommend commenting your thoughts down below. All that being said, if you're an aggressive control leaning player like me, Neonic still has you covered with another paddle. This is their Flow paddle. It's a 60mm paddle. Its face is Toray T700 carbon fiber. It is a hybrid. It's thermoform unibody with perimeter edge foam. So it's a Gen 2 paddle, and it has a polypropylene core, this time with 8mm cells. It's 16.25 inches long with a 7.4 to 7.625 inch wide taper. The grip length is 5.5 inches. The grip circumference is 4.125 inches. The weight is 7.8 to 8 ounces. The advertised swing weight is 114. The advertised twist weight is 6.5. And it does include a really nice neoprene paddle cover, this time with some blue font. And it has that same 6-month manufacturing defects warranty. And the price is $117 after you use promo code MatthewK to knock off 10%. And this paddle is USAP approved. The Flow is a super solid control leaning paddle. However, Neonic created a very unique shape here. And while it's technically a hybrid, this thing can really produce some massive plow through. So there's more than enough juice in this paddle to have a hard hitting baseline game, solid putaways, and just all around aggressiveness. However, the Flow really does shine, in particular in the control part of the game. The face really grabs the ball and you can add all the spin you want and place your shots and target super easily. Also, it just looks different. I don't know if another paddle with this shape exists, and this thing really stands out in the rack at open play. And I do think that cool factor has got to be worth something. And that brings me to value. $117 after promo code MatthewK knocks off 10% is a great deal. This is right up there with Carbon, Vatic, and Volaire's carbon fiber paddles, and you'd be supporting a company that's really doing some innovative stuff while keeping their prices low. And so I definitely think it's worth it if you're on the hunt for a good control paddle. However, if a control paddle isn't your thing and you want a freaking hard-hitting paddle, Neonic has you covered too. This is the Neonic Force. And it was actually Neonic's very first paddle. It's a 60mm paddle. Its face is Toray T700 carbon fiber. The shape is elongated and it's thermoform unibody with perimeter edge foam. So it's a Gen 2 paddle and it has a polypropylene core. And this time they're using the normal 8mm cells. The dimensions are 16.5 by 7.5 inches. The grip length is 5.3 inches. The grip circumference is 4.25 inches. The average weight is 8 to 8.3 ounces. The advertised swing weight is 117. The advertised twist weight is 6.4. Unfortunately, this one doesn't come with a paddle cover, but it does have that 6-month manufacturing defects warranty, and the price is only $90 after you use promo code MatthewK for that 10% discount. Also, this one is USAP approved. Okay, I know this paddle looks like a lot of the other elongated paddles out there with carbon fiber faces, although the neon pink and green are pretty sweet. But this thing actually plays pretty uniquely in my opinion. To me, the Force packs a ton of pop and a ton of power. So much so, I was convinced this thing had a layer of fiberglass for the longest time. I actually asked the owner of Neonic if that was the case though, and it's not. Its face is just those 3 layers of carbon fiber. But this is one poppy and powerful weapon, so there must be some magic going on with how they're distributing weight or something they're doing to the core, because this makes a Vatic V7, which seems super similar on paper, look like a bag of mashed potatoes. In other words, the Force hits really hard, and you'll really need to have great top spin to keep your hits from going out of bounds. It reminds me a bit of the old Legacy Pro, but I've never heard issues with Neonic's paddles core crushing or delaminating. And it's also got some similarities to the Huda Viva Pro Gen 2, but I don't think Neonic is using a strengthening plate in their design the way Huda does. So I don't think you'll see the Force fluctuate with its power output between soft and hard hits the way the Huda paddle does. But really, the standout feature of the Force is the price. This thing is only $90 after promo code MatthewK knocks off 10%, and that's just crazy. You're getting a super solid power paddle at an unreasonably low price. That's over $100 less than a Carbon 3X, about $50 less than a Legacy Pro, and $30 less than Huda or Vatic. It's just dirt cheap for the quality of the paddle. And speaking of value, before I wrap up, I have to talk about Neonic's Pickleball backpack. After promo code MatthewK, this thing is only 54 bucks. I mean, it's super freaking cheap. But don't let that price fool you. This bag is awesome and it seems super well made. First, I love that it's got a more casual look. Not everyone wants to roll up to open play with a giant tournament bag and a second bag full of paddles the way I do. Some folks want to keep things simple, and this bag does just that. It's got a clean design with all the functionality you could ask for. It's got a compartment that can hold multiple paddles and everything else you need to bring to the courts, as well as pockets and compartments for your water bottle, phone, and all the goodies you need with you. But the one thing that's kind of subtle, but that's a huge deal to me, is this hook. When I'm testing paddles, I'll often bring my bag with me onto the court in case I want to switch paddles out during a game, but there's not always a good place to set it down. With this hook though, I can just slap it onto the fence and not have to worry about it ever getting in the way. I mean, no one wants to trip on a bag going for an ATP. That would suck. So I really appreciate how thoughtfully Neonic designed this bag while keeping the price super low. And that sort of brings me to my final thoughts. Neonic really is in that special tier of paddle companies for me. They really seem to be one of those rare companies focused on figuring out how to keep their gear affordable while still pushing the envelope and really innovating. And I can't ask any more from a paddle company. And Neonic is so good on the innovation front. In fact, they've already got a few more paddles in the pipeline. And I know I promised you a sneak peek. Well, this is a prototype of their Flare Prime X, which I believe will be using those 6mm cells I talked about before with a layer of fiberglass sandwiched between 2 layers of carbon fiber. This one should be coming out as early as November 19th. And this is the Flare Swift, which is actually undergoing some changes right now, but will likely be released at the turn of the year. I don't have much information on this one, but it's another paddle utilizing titanium, but in Neonic's hybrid flow shape. And finally, I just got my hands on the Flare Prime X, which is supposed to be that poppier and more powerful flare paddle that's replacing the control that I talked about earlier. This should be available for sale on November 5th at 9 a.m. California time. I'll try and get a review of this paddle up ASAP, and I'll do my best to add a comment to this video with initial thoughts as well once I start testing. But I'm really curious to see if I like this better than the control version, which I can't praise enough, and I am hoping Neonic will consider bringing back. Also, before I let you go, I wanted to highlight some of the overgrips I've been using lately. They're from a company called GripKit. You can get a pack of 4 for less than $10 after you use promo code MatthewK, and I was just super surprised by how much I liked them. I thought I was ride or die Tourna MegaTac for forever because I've always loved having my hand pretty much glued to the paddle grip, but I've started to really get into these more cushioned grips. Grip kits are less tacky than TournaTac and are comparable to the popular Bodhi overgrips and how they feel, but I'd say grip kits are a bit thicker with even more cushion than Bodhi's. Also, that extra thickness helps them last a super long time, which I really appreciate. And I thought they still had really good sweat absorption. I never thought the grip got overly sweaty or slick like some other thick grips I've tried. These seem super breathable even with that added cushion. But the thing that really sticks out and gives GripKit its name is their actual grip kit, which includes basically everything you need to set up a paddle. A paddle eraser, some of the overgrips I just talked about, some super premium edge tape that is just as good as anything else on the market, as well as a few pre-cut strips of lead tape. And all that comes in a super nice see-through bag that makes things super easy when you need to find something at the courts. And as of the recording of this video, this kit is on sale for $35, but promo code MatthewK knocks it down to less than $30. And to be honest, I think that's a really great deal. The only thing the kit doesn't have is a pair of scissors, and I just threw in my go-to folding scissors, which I like because they fold up so they can't poke holes into anything. I'll be sure to leave links in the description for GripKit as well as those scissors in case you want to check them out. As for the Neonic giveaway, all you need to do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment which Neonic paddle you're most excited about and why, and then fill out the Google form in the description so I have a way to contact you if you win. That's it. The raffle will be in about a month, so be on the lookout for an email. Good luck. And that's all I've got. Neonic is really killing it, and I think they're definitely a company worth supporting. There aren't many in this tier of value plus innovation. Also, I know this video was super long, but I want to reiterate, in case I got lost, that I think the Neonic Flare Titanium is the best control paddle utilizing this kind of titanium surface to date. This paddle really is super special, and it's joining a line of paddles that cover the gambit of play styles. There really is a Neonic paddle for every kind of player. And now, that's all I've got. If you found this review helpful, please consider using promo code MatthewK on your next paddle purchase. I have a lot of the popular brands listed below, and my master list has even more. And I'll be sure to leave a link for Neonic's site at the very top. Don't forget to use promo code MatthewK for that 10% discount. You can also support the channel by purchasing some of the cool pickleball gear I've been testing out by using the links and codes in the video description below. I also have a link to my favorite pickleball gear you can get on Amazon as well, and that's got some hidden gems in there. And then of course, hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and slamming that notification bell all go a long way to helping me out as well. Thank you so much for the support. But most importantly, I hope you get to pickle soon, and just don't forget, it's about having fun.